welcome back to Raising Jackson. Today's topic will be getting help and self-education. So basically I'm going to talk about who does what, who we've seen, and where I sort of started looking for help to sort of self-educate me, and just there's so many levels to each practitioner, and I think that not all help is good help. So we're going to talk about maybe vetting your practitioners and it's hard to go to these appointments and not know what to ask. So I think that's where self-education really comes into play. Like, you have to go in fully prepared, fully ready for a fight, because generally that's what it takes to get the help you need. So I will start with who does what. If you've watched our sort of outline of our story and our journey, you will know that we've seen quite a few different types of medical professionals and also health professionals. And I guess the first step is obviously, if you've got concerns, is to go to your GP. Unfortunately, they just, many of them just do not have, just do not have the skill set to help. They don't have the background, they don't have the knowledge, they're not specialists, and I think if many of them are just super dismissive. However, if you are going to your GP and you are getting dismissed and you do want certain tests to be done, like non-invasive tests, so urine samples, stool samples, even blood tests, referrals, that sort of thing, you can, and I have been in my day, quite forceful with not leaving that office until I get the necessary, or whatever we need. So even after probably 8 months of treating my son, the GP was a bit hesitant to get a nutritional sort of set of bloods done. So basically like a full screening, almost like a malnutrition study. And because a lot of them will do, iron and stuff like that, but they won't do your vitamins, your minerals. I don't know why, they just don't. And so when I was requesting this, because he was so limited on his intake, I basically said, look, if you're not, his justification was that he couldn't justify it with Medicare. I said, that's fine. Like, if that's the only hurdle, then I'll pay for it. So just do the referral and I'll pay for it to be done privately. This is an option. Just because they won't bulk bill it doesn't mean it can't be done. You can insist that you will pay for it privately. He sort of said, okay, well, no, I can probably, because he's low on this and this, I can probably justify it. It just took a lot of pushing to get to that stage. But I was fully prepared to pay for it privately if that's what it took to get those studies done. So then your referral to your pediatrician. Now, when you're getting referrals, if you're going publicly, a public specialist can recommend to other public specialists and also private specialists. But if you're going privately, they can only recommend to private specialists. They can't recommend you to, like, for other treatment, to public specialists. That's what I was told by a pediatrician very early on, because I was seeing a private ped and we were sort of going through all the private, mainly due to time restraints, we're going through all the private avenues. But if you wanted to see a public pediatrician, they can refer you to private specialists if that's what you need. Well, don't put it in there, Dylan. That's Mummy's brush. It's very scratchy. So yeah, the peds can recommend to private, but the public peds can recommend to private, but not vice versa. So keep that in mind, because once you start going privately, it's very costly. So if you can wait with certain things, or you can utilize the public system, even with private health, it is super expensive to go private. So the pediatric gastrologist, we saw him to sort of rule out things like EOE and swallow issues, as well as we saw him, and also because we were battling a really, really bad constipation, so we wanted some information about that. And I sort of use every appointment that I go to as an opportunity to learn. So, and I don't just take what they say at face value. I then take it home and I research. So I take a pen and paper, I write it all down. I take it home, I research it independently. I try and find reputable sites, like government sites and that sort of thing. And I research what they are telling me. And basically, I don't think you can make an informed decision if you don't do your own research, because, you know, initially I placed a lot of faith in doctors and a lot of trust in what they were telling me, only to have it backfire, because there's so many, there's such a variation in the healthcare. Some are really good and some are not very good. They won't tell you that they don't know what they're doing, but they don't. It's scary. So yeah, we went to the gastro for his constipation, to rule out things like EOE, to rule out things that were like his ability to swallow, his ability to actually eat food, to make sure that there was nothing physical that was stopping him from being able to eat. And then we saw a occupational therapist. Now we saw one within a feeding team, and I saw one privately. So I found one that operated in the hospital, in a children's hospital. So she was a pediatric OT in a feeding team. So I saw her privately, and I think it's so important not just to pick an OT, because that can be super harmful. You need to pick one that has a lot of experience in dealing with children with anxiety disorders or with eating disorders. Otherwise, they just don't get it, and they can cause a lot of long-term problems with some of the techniques that I have seen used and that I've heard being used. I think a good OT will never ever try and force your child into something. I think a good OT will evaluate your child's strengths and incorporate them into the therapy, and then incorporate the food or the reduction in anxiety therapies into that. I don't think that they will go at it like a bull at a gate like some can. Speech therapist. So speech therapist is basically assessing the oral capacity to eat. So the jaw function, the tongue function, that sort of thing. So they can give you tips on how to strengthen the jaw, on how to reduce fatigue, on how to, get different tongue movements, oral desensitization and stimulation, that sort of thing. So doing it in a pleasant way is key there. Also look for one in a feeding team rather than just one. Or, read their reviews. Go on their sites, go on their social media, Google them, review them a lot. So we're currently due to see an immunologist again, which will be in a couple of months, which will be good. And this is just to rule out or see where we're at in terms of allergic reaction versus intolerance. He's doing a lot better these days, so I feel quite positive about the visit that's coming up. If we get a negative with an allergy response, then I guess it doesn't mean that we're all good to go. It just means that the problems are reducing. So a behavioral specialist. So when he was exhibiting really heavy signs of anxiety, I sort of thought, with a behavioral specialist, what do they do? And the relationship between him and I was so fractured because this had been going on for so long. So they can help you, I guess, with your coping mechanisms and address sort of your shark music. So the things that you're anxious about versus the things that your child is anxious about, and separate the two and help you sort of separate the two. And also, tell you what's typically normal in a child of your child's age versus what is something to look out for, because we were also being watched for autism. So I was concerned, so I took him to a behavioral specialist just to see. Like, I didn't think he had, but I'd had a couple of GPs go, oh, you know. So yeah, he doesn't. He was always too social, in my opinion. But a lot of the feeding challenges are sort of associated with spectrum disorder. So, like a spectrum disorder. So that was something that I wanted to investigate, and obviously if it was going to be playing a factor, I wanted to address it and sort of incorporate the things that may or may not trigger that side of things. A nutritionist or a dietitian, they're slightly different. I didn't have a lot of luck with dietitians. Not to say that there's not some great ones out there, I just didn't have a lot of luck with them. They, again, even the ones in the feeding team didn't seem to have the skill set when working with a child that is highly anxious around food. Like, they can tell you what you can feed them. Like, you should be feeding them this, you should be feeding them this, okay, that's great. But if he doesn't eat it, like, it's, I mean, you can say he's meant to eat it a million times over. It doesn't mean he's going to. Self-education. There's some great support groups on Facebook. So the Mealtime Hostage page, or it's the Mealtime Hostage group, is a great support page for people wanting to practice division of responsibility and reduced anxiety sort of feeding setting. If you look them up, it's just Mealtime Hostage, the group, and the admin there are really, really great. So they're really responsive. They should get back to you ASAP. If you're feeling like intolerances are your issue, or severe reflux, and you figure that it is triggered more so by food and it is more of a symptom rather than the cause of your issues, I would definitely recommend the Breastfeeding Mums with Allergic and Food Intolerant Babies. They're wonderful, world of knowledge on that page, and a lot of them will be able to give you great referrals to specialists because they've done it. They've gone around and around, and they're primarily there to support breastfeeding mothers, but I know that they don't discriminate against formula feeding. So they are pro breastfeeding, but they're also pro feeding your child and getting your child well and healthy. So yeah, even if you're not breastfeeding, I would definitely recommend looking it up and getting involved with some of those mums. In the very, very early days with my son's eating, I wasn't getting anywhere. So I did a lot of research and I did a lot of reading, and I actually reached out to a woman called Erin, I think it's Creech, and she goes by the ARFID Mum, so ARFIDMOM, she's American. And she has a page, and it's really, really helpful and really sort of really informative. Another page that I thought was good was the Reflux Infant Support Association page. They have a bunch of stuff on reflux. They also touch on intolerances and how the two can be related. So if you feel like your child's reflux is triggered by food, this page is great. It's got so many different articles on it. The Allergy and Anaphylaxis page, Australia. This is quite good. This has a whole lot of things regarding, you know, what to look for, standards, that sort of thing. Then there's the Food Standards Australia and New Zealand page. Now they have a bunch of information on labeling because it's really, really tricky to read labeling. They have a food additives listing, so a lot of the foods, you know, you see on the back there's like 320 and 471. You're like, what is that? Oh my god. So they have a whole list of these with what it is next to it. So this page is super good for labeling and standards and what has to be disclosed. And then the last one would be fedup.com. They have a lot of intolerance stuff. Oh, sorry, and also the OT's Corner. This does a bunch of sensory information. So whether you're a seeker or avoider, there's a blog that sort of goes through what to look for in your child with that. So that's getting help and who does what. Subscribe or comment or give me some feedback, and I'll do another post shortly. Thank you.